All right, well, this is really wonderful, and we're so excited to have you all on the call today. My name is Camille Wimbish. I'm with Ohio Voice, and today I'm going to be working with two of my colleagues to help kick this presentation off. Mia, do you want to say hi?
Hello, I'm Mia Lewis from Common Cause, Ohio. Happy to be here.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to planning for this election. It's not usual that we get started in January, but we have a lot of stuff to do, a lot of work to do. So I'm glad we're all here together. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we've got some of our wonderful friends who've been taking the lead and helping to prep us. We've got, I see Kayla's here and Ifeolo and Jen. Do you guys want to say hi for a second?
Good afternoon, folks. Pleasure to see you all. Ifeolo from All Voting is Local, and I coordinated a lot of volunteers in Northeast Ohio in 2020 and helped coordinate the Peacekeeper program with some friends from UGEL and Faith in Public Life. Pleasure to see you all.
I'm Kayla Griffin with All Voting is Local, Ohio. I'm glad to be a part.
And I've got one cat that really loves to participate. So I've been trying to chase her off so that she's not meowing for 10 minutes at you. But okay, let's get started. See what we got. So the reason that I wanted to sort of bring us all together today is because, here we are in 2022. We're eager to get a jump start on planning. I think that this is an opportunity for us to bring a lot of old friends together and invite new friends in to really start to think about how we can plan for activities for next year and sort of be thinking about what types of feedback do we need to have, what type of direction can we get. And so we're eager to hear feedback from you all about helping us to plan for the year to come and start to lay out ways that folks and individuals and organizations are able to get involved. So that's kind of what we are thinking about for getting us together. We're going to go through an overview of election protection just as a sort of level setting for everybody on the call today. We're going to lay out ways for organizations and individuals to get involved. And then Catherine's going to lay us through a Jamboard exercise to sort of take a look at who is on the call, who should be part of these conversations, but actually isn't. So start to sort of wrap our brains around how can we be the best coalition possible. And then we'll leave you with next steps and of course, leave time for questions and answers. So that's kind of what we've got planned today. Why don't we just move to the next slide. Okay, so election protection is really a nationwide coalition, and it's a nonpartisan coalition. The goal is really to provide trusted, nonpartisan information to help us all be able to vote. We know that some communities, BIPOC communities, marginalized communities are more likely to have difficulty voting. So we particularly focus on making sure those communities don't have barriers, but we're certainly here to make sure everyone's able to participate in our elections. And then we report and get those problems resolved with election officials so that as few voters as possible are impacted. So really, we're just trying to make sure that the election goes as smoothly as possible. Next slide. There are two core components to our program. The first is the Hotline call center. So there's an English language number, 866-OUR-VOTE, which you may have heard of. There's a Spanish language hotline number. There's a few other languages that are also supported. And the idea is for folks to call in when they have questions or problems voting. And then there's a field program where we have poll monitors or other volunteers who are out at polling locations or at early voting locations trying to assist voters. So in 2020, we had a number of challenges. You may all recall that there were long lines to access the early voting locations, trying to access the one drop box at the Board of Elections. And the way that it's looking, you know, our election laws are pretty much going to be set for this year. So it's still going to be one drop box. There's still only going to be early voting at one board of elections. So we're going to need to be thinking about how we can assist voters through some of those challenges. In 2020, we also had, unfortunately, you know, rising incidents of threats and intimidation, you know, folks fearing for violence at the polls. And so we were able to sort of mobilize a peacekeeping program, volunteers and faith leaders who were equipped to de-escalate situations at the polls. And I think, unfortunately, that is going to be still a need that we're going to see for 2022. You know, the large crowds of angry moms are still there. There's still a lot of mistrust about our elections and the election results. And so we're going to need to really mobilize folks to make sure that our polling locations are safe and people don't feel as though, you know, they should not come out to vote. So I think there's a lot of challenges. There's also some really great opportunities. So if you think about, we have the ability to really be out there conveying really strong positive messages about voting. We have the opportunity to work with our election officials to make sure that they know that we have their backs, that they should continue to do their job and to make sure that our elections are safe and accurate. We have the opportunity to sort of educate our communities about the safeguards that are already existing in our election systems, as well as being there, you know, to hold voters and say we've got their backs when they're coming to the polls. So I'm excited to really sort of test out new messengers. I'm excited to use some new tools. I'm excited to build teams of really strong volunteers who are going to be out there and, you know, think of this as a sort of a prelude to 2024. So the stakes are really high, but I think we have an ability to make a really big impact. So one of the things that we're excited about is that in 2020, we had a record number of volunteers who came out to help us with election protection. Back in 2016, we had around 300 poll monitors, and we blew those numbers out of the water in 2020 with over 1,200 poll monitors and almost 1,800 volunteers altogether assisting with election protection. We know in midterm elections, those numbers can dip. And we would love to see those numbers stay really, really high. You know, if we can keep 600 or more poll monitors going for this election, I think we'll be in a really great position. And so one of the ways that we're wanting to support poll monitors this year and all of the volunteers that we're bringing into election protection is we're bringing on a brand new full-time volunteer engagement manager who's going to be helping develop teams and to provide volunteers with the support that they need. Next slide. We also want to really lean into calling and promoting the hotline so that voters know to call the hotline when they have questions. We had about 3,300 calls in 2020 over the course of early voting through Election Day. And we know that that was about, I think the 6th highest number of calls in the country. So we can continue to lean into that number and to promote the number. It's only as useful as voters know to call it. And we know that many of the same issues with curbside voting or electioneering or intimidation are still going to be an issue. So we want to really make sure that we're thinking about how we can get that number into communities, particularly for communities that really need the number who are more likely to experience issues.
Camille, you said, what was that stat? You said 6th most in the country?
I believe it was 6th highest. Yeah. So here's what we're thinking in terms of the primary that's set in the spring. We're looking at really leaning into hotline promotion. And we're going to be looking for ideas from you all for how we can continue to promote the hotline in different ways in different communities. We're going to be leaning into a command center where we have Ohio-based volunteers who are virtually checking over the incidents that get logged into the 866 hotline number to make sure that voters who are actually experiencing problems at the polls are able to get those problems resolved with election officials. So that's a really key component, is making sure that we can kind of smooth out any issues You know, a lot of times election officials just may have a misunderstanding of some of the rules, or there's some, you know, an issue around maybe curbside voting that we can sort of clear up ahead of the election in November. So we're going to be doing small teams of volunteers trying to get volunteer poll monitors in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus to really be out there for early voting and election day for the primary. And then, of course, the big to-do is going to be for the general election in November. We're going to be doing all the things that we mentioned, as well as having larger field programs, really trying to rock out all of our large cities. And hopefully some non-metro areas will be able to provide some support too. And we'll be providing some regional leads, some local contacts of leaders who are able to help with materials and volunteer engagement in those local regions. Okay, so that's kind of the overview and the framework. Did folks have questions about anything that I just went over? All right, well, feel free to put it in the chat. We're also going to do pause for questions after Mia's section, which is right up now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Camille. So I'm going to be talking about ways to get involved. And I just want to say that, you know, it's early, it's still January. This is flexible. We're just kind of thinking through, brainstorming all the different ways that you can get involved to maximize the amount of coverage that we have and the amount of voters who we can help. Right now, we are a coalition, ACLU, All Voting is Local, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, League of Women Voters, Common Cause, Ohio Voter Rights Coalition. And, you know, you can be part of this coalition. So I'm going to be talking about organizations, and then I'm going to talk about individuals, because I know we have some organizations on the call, and we also have some individuals on the call. So for organizations, there's different ways to get involved. You can be fully a part of what we're doing. We're going to call that tier 1, and I'm going to show all the tiers on the next slide. Have your logo along with all those others, be publicly identified as part of the coalition, be involved in all the planning, take responsibility for some parts of the program. Or you can just kind of be a part of planning and helping, but without all of that level of involvement. And then the lowest tier is just basically helping to recruit volunteers. And there's a form that you can complete. And I think hopefully Catherine will pop that form in the chat. Obviously, we will send it to you as a follow-up. But just kind of as an example, again, these are fluid and flexible, but if you were to say, okay, we want to go all in, we want to have our logo in, you'll be part of our funding proposals, you will do some kind of promotion. Promotion is a huge part of what we do. It's really important to, you know, promotion of the election protection program, of the hotline number. You'll be there for all of the planning, the regular scheduled check-ins throughout the year. You'll take responsibility for some part of the program, and you'll help us to brainstorm about recruiting and volunteers, et cetera. And as you can see, you guys can read this. Level 2 is kind of not all of that, but some of the things. And then level 3 is really just recruiting volunteers. So, you know, I know there are some folks here from organizations that have done different things in the past, and on that form that there's a link to there, we do ask how you participated in the past. So, you know, that's, and, you know, to know what you've already done will help us know what you want to do in the future. And again, this is flexible. If you want to be tier 1, but you really want to focus on one thing as opposed to, you know, every single thing, that's fine as well. There's some groups that really just want to be involved with the command center, and that's great. Some groups may want to do a lot of promotion of the hotline and you know, advertising and community messaging and, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of flexibility there. For volunteers, we have a sign up here. And again, Catherine is popped that in the chat. And we will send it to you as well afterwards. There are a variety of ways to participate. And at the sign up, I just want to give you a little heads up. you can sign up for each of these separate things, and it's there's a list, and there's 2 pages of lists. So if you don't see the thing that you're looking for, it might be on the 2nd page. There's a little arrow to click ahead. Election protection ambassadors are people who spread the word about election protection. It might be literally just putting up yard signs at different churches around town, or it might be going to give a presentation about what is election protection at your club or sorority. It might be, you know, posting on social media about election protection. So it's something that happens all year long. It isn't just at the time of the election. And the more ambassadors we have, the better, who are spreading the word about the hotline number. And also election protection ambassadors can also help, you know, answer some basic questions about voting. People may say, well, you know, I just moved and I'm not sure whether I need to register at my new address, or like simple questions like that, they might be able to answer. So those are election protection ambassadors. Poll monitors are the folks that actually go out and stand at the polls, and we have cards that they give out which explain your basic voting rights and procedures, and they help voters who are having problems. They have information about how to call the hotline, and that could be either on election day or during early vote. So that's something that you can sign up for. You don't need to do it today, but you can if you want. It's something you can think about. You can recruit some friends to do that along with you. And again, we will have you know, a limited poll monitoring during the primary, and a more dispersed poll monitors out for the general election, and that will be helped by our regional coordinators. Social media monitors, basically what that is checking for inaccurate or, you know, purposefully inaccurate mis and disinformation on social media. People might say, you know, if you have been incarcerated, you can't vote, or something like that. You know, that's a very, very common misunderstanding, but also it could be, you know, a weapon. You know, misinformation can be weaponized against voters who really don't. Voting is a little bit more complicated than it seems, and there's all kinds of ways to get it slightly wrong, and that will end up hurting voters. So we have monitors who get trained to spot that kind of information and figure out how to combat it without spreading it. So that's a training that you do and that you get involved in. Command Center volunteers, those are folks with legal experience or who have been involved with the Command Center in the past, who know how to answer those a little bit trickier questions that come into the hotline. Peacekeepers, again, they're trained. They would receive training. Often they are social workers or clergy, people who have some experience dealing with people who are either, you know, argumentative or distressed or in conflict, and those would be deployed out to, you know, different situations where something was arising. I also want to mention that we do, as part of the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, we also have Board of Elections teams, and those are teams that are working with boards of elections to support them and to you know, to help do things like recruit poll workers, but also resolve, you know, ask them how they're dealing with X or Y problem, and just generally be in touch with the boards of elections to kind of promote cooperation and understanding and kind of smooth operation. And I think increasingly, as we go into a situation where folks who work at Board of Elections are being accused of things and challenged in unfair ways, we really want to be as supportive of them as we possibly can, as well as make sure that they're, you know, doing their job properly and helping voters properly. So that's something else that you can get involved with if you want. So I know that's a lot of information. That, you know, if you have questions, now's a great time to jump in. And I'm just now seeing a few things in the chat. Yes, we are nonpartisan. Having high school students participate would be excellent. They can, of course, be poll workers, but poll monitors would also be great. Other questions? Some of the materials that we have, of course, yard signs with promoting the hotline number. We have these voting boxes where people can pick up voter registration forms and absentee ballot applications. We haven't deployed those yet, but we will. We also have cards that just kind of give information about election protection, and those could be, left at community centers or all different places. So those are the kinds of materials that election protection ambassadors can spread. The voter boxes, we bought like realtor information boxes, and then we had these very nice information sheets that were very colorful and beautiful, printed up and laminated, and then we attached them to the voter box, to the realtor boxes with zip ties, and we got fence posts. It was a bit of an elaborate, production. And then we found places to put them around town, and people kind of signed up to monitor them. It was important that they took care of them properly and made sure that there weren't any completed forms that were left sitting in there. So that's something that, we can do again. Luckily, we're starting early enough that we have time to get this all together. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will hand over to Catherine and we can keep going.
Mia, all we need to do is fill out that form in the chat and then we can join like that.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's one form for individuals and there's one form for organizations. And that's it.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign up as an organization. Okay, but I'm gonna sign in.
That's fantastic. And again, don't feel, I just kind of put in there tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. If you're not sure, you can just, be in touch with us. Again, it's flexible.
Any other questions for Mia? So what I did is I popped into the chat the Jamboard link, and one of the challenges, when we're 27 people and we're in a room physically rather than virtually, it's a little bit easier to have a conversation. But if you will open the Jamboard right now, and folks, if you'll click on the Jamboard, so so I don't know how many of you have used this before, but it's fairly simple. The idea is that what we'll do is we will, pick up a sticky note. Mia's highlighting the sticky note. It's the 4th down on the left. And Mia, if you'll make a sticky note. All right, so you can choose your color and then you just start writing. So this is super simple. Basically what we're trying to get is like, who's in the room today? And so if you're willing to put down your name, your organization, if you have one, your location, that would be wonderful. And I'm gonna encourage all of us to start adding them. What you'll notice is sometimes they end up kind of getting stuck on top of one another. So just, move them. If yours is on top of another one, just move it. And I'm so glad, we're all the different people in the room.
I'll move them around.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mia. And I did a little shout out to Elizabeth because I noticed the picture in her garage. I'm glad that Pastor Hank is here with us. I was going to say the last time I saw Pastor Hank, it was extremely cold. We met on January 6th for one of those vigils, and it was super cold. It looks like Angela Lynn is in Dayton. Selena is up in Cleveland. We have a Bowling Green here. I noticed Ifeolu, you want to give Shaker Heights a shout out?
And I'm Brandy Slaughter's replacement with the Ohio Council of Churches.
Oh, we're so glad you're here. Do you want to do a little introduction? Because many of us haven't had an opportunity to meet you. Dr. McIntosh, do you want to introduce?
Yes, I was trying to say
tell us about yourself.
Hi. I'm Mariah McIntosh. I am the new Director of Public Policy for the Ohio Council of Churches, replacing Brandy Slaughter, who has moved on to a faculty position at the University of Maryland. I live in the Bowling Green area, and I pastor one of our Black Methodist churches in Toledo, Ohio, Phillips Temple CME Church. And so I've just started December 1 and trying to get my feet wet and trying to keep track of all of these Zoom calls that Brandy's been involved in and trying to keep up and learn and get my feet wet.
We're so glad to have you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yay. Thank you so much.
We're here to support you however you need.
Yes,
Well,
and we're here to support you.
Well, and I have to say it's wonderful. I was going to say we have Petey Tally adding hers in right now.
Hey, Petey Tally,
yes.
I've been trying to talk to you for years. I remember Petey when I lived in Youngstown.
Youngstown, yes, good to see you, Dr. McIntosh.
With Gelada, yes.
Yes, and we will connect since you are so close.
Yes, it's yeah. And when you stepped away from the state position and came back to Toledo, I'm like, I want to get in touch with Petey. When I knew I was coming to Toledo, you were the first person on my list that I wanted to contact.
I recall. I have a number. I tried to call you. I don't know if it's the right number, but I'll send it to you in the chat. Okay.
All right.
All right, sis.
I just want to say quick things. A couple of folks are having trouble. So if you go all the way over to the left, at the top, you see a pen, then you see an eraser, then you see a select, and the fourth one down is the sticky note. If you click on that sticky note, that's when you're going to get one of the little colored notes to come up. Some folks are doing text boxes, that's fine too, but the sticky note's probably the easiest. So if you haven't done so yet, feel free to jump in.
Well, and one of the things that is interesting as you're looking at this, we have folks from Cleveland, so from way up at Lake Erie, we have Toledo, and then we also have, a good number in Columbus, and as you work your way down all the way to the Ohio River. Kinsey, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Sorry, it's lunchtime for me. But hi, Kinsey Kandre with River Valley Organizing, and we focus on the Ohio River Valley. So it's a common misconception that we are rural, but we're actually very small towns. So we have a lot of small towns along the Ohio River Valley, and election protection is super important. So I'm happy to be here with you all.
Well, thank you. All right, we feeling ready to move on to the next Jamboard? So in this case, we're going to ask you to grab the sticky. It's fourth down. You're going to add your name and your organization, and then, kind of your constituency. This is somewhat similar, but that notion of thinking about like, well, who is it that we talk to on a regular basis? What kind of area do we cover? So the good example would be like Common Cause is a statewide organization. But our biggest base is it's in the 3 C's. We have chapters in those 3 C's, but then many of you will have chapters in many different places, or that notion that we get a sense of like, well, where are we located and who are we serving? And so for clergy, please, add, that, just providing information about, who we are.
Sorry, I'm just popping that in, and then I'm going to go to the next page here. All right, so grab your sticky.
All right. And so this is the second page that we're going on to. And grab your sticky. I'm doing one right now.
Is that Dr. McIntosh, is there a geographic kind of, is that throughout Ohio, or is it?
Somehow it posted before I finished typing. I'm trying to edit it now.
Okay, very good. And if anyone needs me to do one for them, feel free to add the info in the chat and I can add it.
Well, and let's face it, this is not the most natural way to do this, but unfortunately, we can't all be together. And I'm making some of these a little larger just because it's easier to see that way. I'm going to move you, Kinsey. All right.
And I think, you know, this is a little awkward to kind of do in real time in a group here. But I think one of the things that we were really looking at when we were thinking about this question was, you know, who are our constituents? Are we predominantly white? Are we predominantly Black? Are we predominantly urban? Are we predominantly rural? Are we, you know, are we more center politically or whatever, so that we kind of know who we're, what constituencies are included already in this amongst the groups that are here, and which ones do we need to make sure that we find a way to reach. So
okay, when I go back to that slide, I don't see my post. I see it here, but I don't see it on the actual Jamboard.
Let me see.
It's there on the Jamboard.
There, yeah, it's here. It's blue. It's on the left-hand side. And if you double click on it, I think you should be able to edit it.
Okay, there it is. I see it. But somehow, for me, the typing is not there.
Double click on it.
Okay, I see what I've typed. I just don't see. There it is. All right, got it.
Joan, I just tilted you to the side. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
I love that.
I'm learning to use this tool. I do think, yeah, I'm not really sure what to do about there. No. Well, I do think what's nice about this is getting a sense of, you know, who we are. And because of course, we need to be thinking, you know, the next one is thinking about, well, who isn't in this room? And so I invited a number of people that just weren't able to attend, but we should be thinking about who else we'd like to actually see, you know, who we actually like to see come and help participate, help with plannings, help with volunteer recruitment. You know, the big lie is a real challenge. And the kind of misinformation that is going to be out there this year is really challenging. So we need to think about what are the gaps and how can we cover those gaps and what can we do differently. Camille, anything you wanted to add here?
No, I think that's great. If folks are ready to move to the next slide.
Great.
Maybe a minute.
Tell us about, oh, I was sorry.
Go ahead. No, sorry.
I was just gonna ask Colette if you could tell us a little bit about America Votes.
I have to go off mute. After 2.5 years of living on Zoom, you would figure I would figure that out by now. So America Votes is a coalition of about 65 partners. We have folks organizing in the labor movement, LGBTQ spaces, community groups, reproductive justice organizations, environmental organizations. So you know, our partners are mainly statewide organizations, but many are county-based or regional-based or local organizations. So they represent basically all of the state geographically, but also lots of different constituency groups, both from specifically, want to just lift up that a lot of our partners are BIPOC-led and BIPOC-focused in their work, including focus on AAPI and Latinx voters, as well as Black voters, obviously. So yeah. Again, our coalition's been around for about 20 years. And that's about it. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, why don't we move? Unless people do have questions for Colette. Why don't we move to thinking about the kind of gaps? Mia, if you'll move us to the next Jamboard. So this is the one where basically what we're saying, you know, grab a sticky note. It's the fourth one down on the left.
Sorry.
And then, you know, add who you think, who are we missing? I said add bonus points if you have their email, but mostly I'm kidding. You know, one of the things that we know we need are introductions to folks. So I love the first one being unions. Yes. And so start thinking, you know, and it can be like, oh, I'm concerned about, you know, the Somali community in Columbus. You know, we need to be thinking differently about that. Disability organizations. Oh, I like the Poor People's Campaign. Oh, students and youth. Sororities and fraternities. I'm going to add rural action. We have NAACP, farmers, faith leaders that are not Christian. We're thinking about care.
ACLU is here. Moderate Republicans, yay.
So, you know, as we look at this, you know, one of the things that can happen is we get really focused on the work, and we have issues with kind of identifying all the gaps. And like one of the things that I really see about this year is this ability to think differently and give ourselves a little bit of time. And you know, the neighborhood organizations, you know, I think because, you know, we need to be thinking of larger organizations. And so like you think about the NAACP that, you know, has chapters all over the state. And yet we also need to be thinking about the neighborhood organizations that are doing some amazing work. And so this really gets us started. Does anybody, you know, want to add kind of their thoughts about, you know, who we should be including, who's missing from this conversation? And of course, if you have an email, bonus points.
So I lost mine, but I had put farmers up there. I was just thinking the farmers union, right? Which obviously several of us have connections to, especially Camille. But because I think it would be great to have the signs in rural, I think we could hit a lot of communities across the state with just the signs itself. I would put maybe restaurants in there as another place where we could have materials, thinking about the restaurants associations or, you know, those kinds of things.
Any other thoughts from folks?
Well, I see HBCUs there, which I think is a fantastic one, but I'm also going to just put college campuses generally, which I think we want to make sure we have, and actually high schools, because you know, there are plenty of voters in high schools.
Soon to be voters, right?
Well, or if they're, you know, if they're seniors and they're going to be 18 by November.
Now, Petey, you've been doing election protection probably longer than I have. Are there things that you want to add or thoughts that you've had as you look at this?
Yeah, I always think about when we think about whose vote needs to be protected, we tend to think BIPOC communities, largely LGBTQ, young people, seniors, but I'm not so sure that we think about it in terms of progressives who live in suburban areas. And so we often find ourselves like, you know, congregated, you know, in BIPOC communities doing this work. And you know, white folks who live in suburbs who are working class people, just generally.
That's a great point.
Who will not necessarily know what state ledge district they're in, because we just redrew lines, who may have some poll changes that they may or may not be aware of. And we don't even think about the fact that they could be standing in in the suburbs, that they're okay. But I think we need to probably kind of start thinking about how do we reach those people and bring them closer to us.
Miles had a great suggestion, which was housing projects. Oh my goodness, now we just need to have about 50 times as many people volunteering and helping, because this is a lot of places to reach and groups to involve, but it's excellent.
Well, it took us a little while to get started with the Jamboard, but I think this was a good way to get us thinking. So, you know, part of the thinking is that if you had ideas and you posted an idea, if you would be willing to share, you know, emails with us. I'm not suggesting right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop an email for the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition into the chat. And so, you know, this kind of gets us started thinking. And I'm going to encourage us all to like take a little time and send an email, you know, and contact information, because, you know, knowing that, hey, unions is a good idea, or knowing, hey, let's do the farmers union, or let's do seminary students, it can be really useful to actually think about like, well, who is the person who could actually contact them? And so send an email, let us know what you're thinking about and how we can do more kind of collective outreach. And then with that, I am going to hand it off to my friend Camille to lead us through towards the end of the meeting.
One thing in here before y'all go there. I learned as a poll worker the last few elections, our college students seem to not be aware of registering and voting where they go to school. So a lot of them were registered in another part of the state, but don't go home and don't know about early voting. So then they show up on election day and they fill out these, what do they call those? Those
provisional.
Yeah, and we know they're going to get tossed because nobody told them about how they properly register to vote while they're in school. So yeah, we got to get all of the college students, not just specific ones. That's all.
Point well taken. Well, yes, as Catherine says, we have our work cut out for us, but I think we have a great start here, and I'm excited to think about our next steps, which I believe Mia is going to guide us through in terms of making sure that we fill out the form and then come up with some strategies for how we can sort of get together and break this work up into sort of more manageable pieces. Mia?
Yes. Well, I don't think I have a lot more to add, but just to encourage everyone to fill out that form. And again, there's a slot at the bottom to give, you know, any additional information or comments that you want to put in there. For individuals, you can sign up. You know, it's still early. So if you get emails from the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition or pretty much any of the other groups, you'll be getting more information periodically. But we're very happy that you joined us so that you can begin to spread the word as well. We have our volunteer engagement manager will be beginning on February 1st, and that person will take a lot of the responsibility for some of the regional organizing. But essentially, once we have a sense of you know, what groups are already signing up to do what things and where else we need to reach out towards, then we will be planning regular check-in calls starting very soon for the primary and then for the general, you know, later in the year. Camille, Are there more specific kind of next steps that you'd like to cover?
I think basically everybody that was here today will be getting a follow-up email in the next day or so that has links to all of the important things that we shared with you today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Yeah. And you know, when you do join as a kind of a full tier 1 member as an organization, we do have regular check-ins so that we can kind of monitor, you know, what's happening. So that's a kind of a year-long commitment if you want to do the primary and the general. But there are, of course, a multitude of ways to participate. Any other, I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other here. Any other questions or comments, anyone?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for joining with us and thinking about, you know, what should we do for the primary and who's missing and how can we do this so that this works well in 2022. I think we know that people are less trustful of elections. And we know that this work is going to be really important. And we know that the ability to empower people so that they call that hotline, they need to know about that hotline so they're empowered to use it. So I'm just really glad that we've started this off, and we'll make sure that we have some good meetings coming up. And also, if you have suggestions, you know, I popped the email in there. Just, you know, if you have suggestions for our next steps, please let us know. All right. Thank you, everybody.